Hi, my name's Viana. I gave my parents $7 million, everything I had, so they could rest, finally, after a lifetime of struggle. But the next time I came home, my mom was sobbing. My dad stood in the yard, trembling beside a suitcase. Their bank account was empty, their house stolen, and the man who did it, my sister's husband. He spit in my father's face and said, "Useless old man, it's mine now, get out." And my sister? She laughed, until I walked in. Then everything went silent. They thought I'd disappear quietly, but I built my life in silence. Now they'll hear what silence sounds like when it fights back. I remember the air being heavier than usual that evening. Dallas summer nights are always thick, but that day it felt like the heat carried secrets. I pulled into the driveway of the house I bought for my parents, the one they called their forever home. The white gate leaned open, barely hanging on its hinges, and a week's worth of mail burst from the box like a warning I hadn't seen coming. I stepped out of the car slowly, my heels pressing into the gravel. There was no welcome, no familiar wave from the porch. Just silence, broken only by the faint, unmistakable sound of my mother crying. My heart dropped. She sat on the edge of the porch, her shoulders trembling as she cradled a lukewarm cup of tea. My father stood just beside her, hands shaking, staring down at a suitcase sitting in the middle of the yard like a question no one wanted to answer. "Dad," I called gently. He looked up, eyes bloodshot, lips parted like he wanted to explain but couldn't find the words. My mother didn't look at me. She just held that cup tighter, like it was the only thing grounding her to earth. I glanced around. The porch light flickered overhead, casting long shadows across the scattered boxes and half-draped furniture inside. The front door was wide open, and from within I heard laughter, sharp, carefree, and absolutely foreign. I stepped inside, and there he was. Theron, my sister's husband, strolled out of the living room like he owned the place. He wore his smugness like cologne, overbearing, cheap, impossible to ignore. A beer dangled from his fingers, his sleeves rolled up like he'd been rearranging the furniture that wasn't his. "Viana," he said, like we were old friends bumping into each other at the grocery store. "Didn't expect you this early." Before I could respond, Isela followed behind him, wearing one of Mom's aprons. My mother never let anyone touch her aprons. "What's going on?" I asked, not moving from the doorway. Theron leaned against the frame like it was his, sipping the beer slowly. "We've handled things, Viana. You don't belong here anymore. This is our house now." I blinked. "Our house?" Isela didn't miss a beat. "You gave it to them, didn't you? Well, they gave it to us, fair and square." For a moment, I couldn't process it. My brain ran through every legal form, every conversation. I had transferred ownership to my parents because I trusted them. I never thought I'd have to protect them from their own. Dad whispered, "He said it was just for the taxes." Mom lowered her head, shame pooling in her eyes. She couldn't look at me. I stepped back outside, needing air that didn't feel like betrayal. The suitcase still sat in the yard, stuffed, zipped, ready. "You're really kicking them out," I said, not even asking, just confirming. Theron followed me onto the porch. "Go on, take them back to Houston if you care that much, but don't expect us to pay a dime back." Behind him, Isela laughed, not like she used to, carefree, joyful, but cold, like glass shattering. I didn't cry, I didn't yell, I just stared at her, letting the silence stretch. That laugh, so hollow, so sharp, echoed in places I didn't know I still carried pain. I bent down, gripped the suitcase, and stood straight. Mom looked like she wanted to say something, but the words were stuck behind a dam of guilt. I reached for the cup in her hands. The tea had gone cold, but still held a wisp of warmth. I placed it on the porch railing carefully, like it mattered. "You'll stay with me tonight," I said softly. "We'll talk later." Dad nodded. Mom didn't move for a beat. Then she rose slowly, like her body weighed more than it used to. From behind the screen door, Isela shouted, "You think you're better than us because you have money? You'll regret this." I didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. We walked toward the car. The wind stirred just enough to rattle the mailbox. The porch light flickered one final time and went out. I helped them into the back seat. When I got into the driver's side, my phone buzzed. A message from the bank lit up the screen. Joint account balance, 0 toes or zozio. And that's when I realized the house wasn't the only thing they'd taken. The hotel curtains were cracked just enough to let in a pale band of morning light, slicing across the carpet like an accusation. I hadn't slept much, neither had my parents. I could hear my mother's soft snoring behind the wall, my father occasionally shifting in the creaky hotel bed beside hers. I sat up in the chair by the window, laptop on my knees, the glow of the screen illuminating a face I barely recognized anymore. Mine, reflected faintly in the glass. I logged into the account. At first, I thought there was a glitch. $7 million, gone. I refreshed the page. Once, twice. Nothing changed. 0.00. I didn't breathe. My fingers hovered over the mousepad, too stunned to move. Then I clicked into the transaction history. My stomach turned cold as the list of withdrawals loaded. Each transfer was tidy, calculated, spread over 2 days. Every cent had been moved into something called Calder Joint Holdings, LLC, registered under one name, Theron Marcin. The rest of the morning moved like molasses. I printed the statements page by page, the tiny hotel printer spitting out each one like a slow drumbeat. My hands shook the whole time. The quiet hiss of the machine was the only thing keeping me grounded. He didn't just trick them. He built a company with my parents' names. Their retirement was the front. My money, their fear, was the foundation. He used everything I gave them, everything they trusted me with, and made it his. I didn't cry, not yet. But something shifted. Something cold and quiet, like the stillness before a storm. The drive back to Dallas was mercifully short, but every mile made the weight in my chest heavier. I pulled up to the house just past noon. Broad daylight laid everything bare. No flickering porch lights or shadows to hide behind. Just sunlight, brutal and unforgiving. And the house looked off. There was a new keypad lock on the front door. I knocked 3 times. Firm. I wasn't here to play nice. A click. The door opened a sliver. Isela's face appeared, all mascara and smugness. Her voice dripped with fake surprise. "You're trespassing, Vi." "Mom's insulin is inside," I said flatly. "I'm not leaving without it." Her smile widened. "We boxed it up. You can pick it up from storage once the lawyers finish." Before I could speak, Theron's voice rang from deeper inside. "Make sure she records nothing." I froze. My eyes scanned the porch, and there it was, a tiny camera fixed above the doorframe, recording every second. They weren't just shutting me out. They were building their version of the story, erasing mine before I could even tell it. A soft voice came from behind me. My father, standing by the car, watching it all unfold. "Just let it go, sweetheart." I turned around slowly. He looked tired, beaten. But I couldn't let it go. That phrase, it felt like poison now. I sat in my car outside a strip mall parking lot, staring at my phone. I dialed the family's old attorney, the one who helped set up the gift transfer 2 years ago. He answered on the 3rd ring. "Viana, wow, it's been a while. What can I—" "Why didn't you call me?" My voice was even. He hesitated. I spoke with your sister. She said the house paperwork was urgent, that you were traveling. Did you even try to confirm anything with me?" "Well," They said you'd approved it. For tax purposes, it looked legitimate. Because it had my parents' signatures on it? Silence. I hung up. No shouting, no curse words. Just the sound of my fingertips drumming against the steering wheel like a metronome winding down a slow, inevitable beat. That night, I sat at the edge of the hotel bed. The television buzzed low in the background, but no one was watching. My parents had both fallen asleep. My mother clutched a pillow to her chest like it was armor. My father's hand twitched in his sleep, fingers curling in and out. I looked at them for a long time. I thought about the years they worked, my father with his bad knees, and my mother who never bought herself a new coat if mine still fit. They didn't have college degrees. They had pride. That was their wealth. And now, my mother murmured in her sleep, voice barely a whisper. "It's okay, Is. Don't tell Vi. She'll worry." Isella. Even now, in dreams, she protected the wrong daughter. I exhaled slowly. I wasn't angry at that. Not really. I understood it. Some people are born to be forgiven, no matter how much they take. Others, like me, are born to clean up the mess. But something shifted then. I looked at my father's hand, veins visible beneath thin, worn skin. I leaned forward and whispered to myself, "They took your house, your name, your pride, but they don't get your story." And mine? Mine wasn't over yet. The sky was still dark when I left the hotel. A few hours before sunrise. The printer pages were folded neatly in my hand, a thick little stack that felt heavier than it should have. Outside, the air was cooler. Still, no wind. I stood by the car for a moment, staring at the city skyline in the distance. I didn't want revenge. I wanted justice. I wanted my parents to stop waking up scared. I wanted to sit across from them at dinner one night and see relief in their eyes instead of shame. I held the papers tighter and whispered, "They don't get to write the ending." And just like that, the engine turned over, smooth and steady. Then my phone vibrated on the console. Voicemail. I pressed play. A soft voice, cautious and professional. "Ms. Calder, I'm sorry to call so early, but your parents' room here was canceled this morning. They were never supposed to be residents here. If they weren't sent there by the facility, who did it?" The engine was still humming when I pulled into the parking lot of the nursing home. A wide gray building with beige trim sat hunched at the end of a long, cracked driveway. The kind of place no one visited unless they had to. I parked under a flickering security light, and before stepping out, I took a long breath, steadying the weight in my chest. There were answers here, somewhere under the antiseptic smell and fake smiles. Inside, the lobby was dim, with flickering fluorescent lights and a faint scent of bleach layered over something bitter. The receptionist, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes and overdone lipstick, looked up from her magazine as I approached. "Can I help you?" she asked, sliding her glasses down her nose. "My parents, Howard and June Calder. They were brought here yesterday," I said, pulling out my ID. "I need to see them." She frowned and clicked through her computer. "There's no Calder listed in our current resident log." My stomach tightened. "Could you check yesterday's intake? They were just placed. Someone told me they were here." The woman flipped through a clipboard, her brow furrowed deeper. "There is a form with the name Calder, yes, but no current residency. And the signatures?" She hesitated, then tilted the clipboard toward me. The moment I saw them, my stomach sank. My father's name, written in shaky, uneven letters that stopped halfway through. My mother's signature looked worse, slanted, jagged, as if her hand had been forced. These signatures," I whispered, stepping back. The receptionist gave me a strange look. "We had a nurse complete their intake. Someone else signed the papers. We assumed it was family." "Can I speak to the nurse who handled it?" She disappeared through a door behind the counter. I stood there, staring at the forms. My father couldn't hold a pen without his hand shaking like a leaf in the wind. There was no way he signed anything legibly, and yet his name was right there. 10 minutes passed. A nurse in navy scrubs emerged holding a slim folder. She handed it over, eyes cautious. "This is what was signed when they were brought in." The ink bled across the paper like it had been pressed too hard. Next to the scribbled names was a typed note. Patient was cooperative. I ran my fingers over the line. "He hasn't been able to write that steady since 2021, I said quietly, half to myself. "He has Parkinson's." His signature ended halfway through. The nurse's mouth tightened. "You might want to talk to the person who brought them in." "Who was it?" She motioned toward the reception desk. Mounted above it was a small screen looping surveillance footage. There, frozen in black and white, a tall man in a blazer, sunglasses inside, clipboard in hand. "Theron." My pulse jumped. I asked for a copy of the intake papers. "I'm sorry, ma'am," the receptionist said, glancing down. "Those are confidential. HIPAA regulations." I stepped closer, voice low and flat. "You're telling me you accepted 2 elderly people into your care, had them sign legal documents under visible duress, and now you're hiding behind HIPAA?" Her eyes darted. "If I walk out of here without those papers, this place will be the subject of a full elder abuse investigation by morning." Silence stretched between us. Finally, she slid the folder across. I took it with both hands, careful not to wrinkle the corners. My hands were shaking again, but this time it wasn't from shock. It was restraint. I stepped out into the bright sun, and the world blurred for a second. I stopped at the edge of the sidewalk, the folder pressed to my chest. My hands trembled, just like hers used to. A memory hit me, hard and fast. Graduation day. I was 23, nervous, proud, holding my diploma, but it almost slipped through my fingers. Mom caught it before it hit the ground. "We'll hold it together," she whispered. She always held us together. Now I was standing alone, her name scribbled across a lie, and my own hands were the ones shaking. Back in the car, I shut the door and let the silence surround me. No music, no news, just quiet. The papers rested in the passenger seat. I closed my eyes, and a memory bloomed behind my eyelids. Thanksgiving, 10 years ago. Mom burned the turkey. Dad laughed and called it crispy love. We ate it anyway, with boxed stuffing and 2 sweet cranberry sauce. That night, the power went out, so we lit candles and played cards. We laughed until our cheeks hurt. I swallowed hard. "We never think the last normal day will actually be the last," I whispered. My phone buzzed in my lap. An email. Fraud Department, Chase Private Clients. "Ms. Calder, we regret to inform you that the transactions initiated under the Calder Joint Trust cannot be reversed. The transfers were authorized by all parties listed under the trust agreement." Just like that, the door slammed shut on hope. I stared out the windshield. They'd taken everything. Not just the money, not just the house. They'd taken the version of family I thought we were. But something about my mother's voice kept echoing. "Don't tell Vi. She'll worry." Why didn't she want me to know? What was she hiding for them, or from me? I didn't have the answer yet. But I knew one thing. This wasn't just fraud. This was deeper. Something rotting beneath the surface. I drove in silence to their old house, pulled up slowly and parked across the street. Curtains drawn, windows shut, but I could hear laughter, light, careless. I didn't knock, didn't even get out of the car. Instead, I opened my laptop and began to type. Subject: Elder Exploitation Story. Urgent. "Hey, Em, you once said if I ever had something real, something worth telling, I should call you. This is me calling. It starts with kindness, and it ends with fraud." I hit send. Then I sat there, breathing slowly, the weight shifting again, not gone, but changing. I looked into the rearview mirror. My own eyes stared back. Tired, yes, but sharp. "You think I'm done," I said quietly. "But I just started." A faint sound carried through the cracked window, the chime of something metallic tapping glass, like a spoon against a cup, a sound I hadn't heard in years but recognized instantly. It was the sound of Mom stirring her tea. My phone buzzed. I reached for it, thinking it was Em replying, but it wasn't. An unknown number, no text, just a photo. I tapped to open it. There they were, my parents, standing next to Theron, their hands on papers, signing. Theron's grin wide and smug. Beneath the image, one line of text. "Thought you might want a keepsake." He wanted to mock me. Instead, he handed me proof, not just of what he'd done, but of how confidently he believed he could get away with it. That photo on my phone didn't shake me. It focused me. 6 days passed. No calls, no messages, not even a cryptic text from Isella. Just silence. Then, Sunday morning, my phone buzzed with a familiar name. The message was short. "Family brunch. Mom wants peace. Don't make it awkward." I stared at it for a long time, thumb hovering over delete. But then Dad called. "She misses you, Vi. Maybe this time we can all sit down like adults. Talk. Talk. Like that ever fixed anything in our family." But the tremor in his voice pushed me over. "Fine," I told him. "I'll be there." I kept it simple. Gray slacks, soft beige blouse, hair pulled into a low twist. Nothing to distract. No expression to read. Let them guess. The restaurant was one of those places that tried to look upscale by playing soft jazz and serving eggs with parsley sprinkled on everything. I walked in, the air thick with the scent of bacon grease and bleach. "Are you with the Marcine party?" the hostess asked, clipboard in hand. Just one line, but it sliced deeper than it should have. I nodded, followed her to the center table where Isella held court like she'd been crowned Queen of Suburbia. Pearls, flawless makeup, that polished smile that never quite touched her eyes. Theron lounged next to her, his hand draped over hers like he was staking a claim. My mother smiled when I sat beside her, tight, wobbly. She didn't meet my eyes. Dad sat quiet, fingers tracing the edge of his water glass. The air smelled like orange zest and unease. Theron stood up with a glass of mimosa, clearing his throat. "To family," he said. "To the ones who stayed and who built something lasting." Some folks at nearby tables turned and nodded. Familiar faces from church, the country club, people who didn't know a thing. Isella leaned forward, her voice smooth as honey. "You know, Viana has always been generous. If not for her, we wouldn't have this beautiful home, or the new opportunity to expand." I didn't blink. "But money," she added, with a knowing smile. "Can't buy family, can it?" Laughter rippled lightly through the table. That polite, southern kind of laugh where people pretend everything's fine. My mother looked down at her napkin. Dad's jaw twitched. No one said a word. I just took a slow sip from my water. The condensation slid down the glass like a tear no one had permission to shed. Then I slipped my phone from my bag, tilted just enough so only I could see. There it was. The cloud link. Sent from my friend at the paper. One tap, and the screen filled with footage, clear as daylight. Theron, 2 weeks ago, walking into a bank. The timestamp matched the withdrawal. He handed over a folder, turned, and signed something. My father's signature forged right in front of a security. Camera. I didn't smile, didn't flinch, just watched it loop once, twice. Isella laughed again, that brittle sound I'd heard on the porch. She thought she'd won. But timing matters, and I'd been silent long enough. The brunch droned on, chewing, fake laughs, syrupy voices. The waiter cleared plates. My mother fumbled her napkin, and I leaned down to pick it up. That's when I saw it, a faint bruise on her wrist, partially hidden beneath her sleeve. I didn't say a word, not about the bruise, not about the video. When I sat back up, I looked straight at Theron and said, "Enjoy the house while it's still yours." The silence hit like a dropped plate. For a moment, nobody breathed. Theron chuckled, too loud. But it was forced. That's how fear sounds when it tries to wear a mask. I paid the check before anyone could offer. Quick swipe of the card, no ceremony. Outside, I stepped under the awning, letting the door shut behind me. Through the glass, they looked smaller, fuzzier, like shadows in a photo someone tried too hard to stage. "They think I'm the quiet one," I whispered. "They've forgotten how quiet power works." My phone buzzed again. From the journalist. "Got the footage. It's clean. Bank confirms timestamp." I typed back, "Hold it. I'll tell you when to drop it." I didn't look back, but as I walked toward my car, a sleek black SUV rolled out behind me. Theron at the wheel, sunglasses on despite the overcast sky, following. He didn't tail me aggressively, just enough to remind me that he could. Every turn I made, he was a few car lengths behind, headlights glinting in my mirror. I took the long way home, weaving through the back roads that cut across the edge of town. The sky hung low, heavy with clouds, the kind that pressed on your chest, whispering that something was coming. My hands tightened on the wheel. I couldn't shake the image of Mom's wrist, the faint purple bruises, her sleeve tugged quickly down, or the way Dad's eyes had darted toward Theron at brunch before he dared to speak. It wasn't just fear I'd seen there, it was obedience. "I used to think silence kept the peace," I said out loud, voice barely above the hum of the engine. But silence was the weapon they used against me. The phone on the passenger seat glowed softly. Recording. Always recording now. Every call, every conversation. I wasn't just protecting myself anymore. I was building a case. The roads grew darker, the fields on either side stretching empty. I didn't turn the radio on, just drove, headlights slicing through the night, until I could finally breathe again. When I glanced in the rearview mirror, the SUV was gone. But by then, the quiet felt heavier than his presence had. I parked down the street from the house. Their house. My house. The one I'd bought for them. The porch light flickered the same way it had that night. Unfixed, ignored. I watched the windows for several minutes. Behind the blinds, faint shadows moved. Then Theron appeared, pacing, phone pressed to his ear, gesturing wildly. When his car finally backed out of the driveway, I waited another minute before stepping out. The air smelled like rain and regret. The door creaked when I pushed it open. Inside, the house felt hollow. Furniture out of place. A smell of lavender cleaner mixed with stale air. I walked quietly down the hall until I reached their bedroom door. I knocked softly. "Mom?" For a second, nothing. Then her voice, thin, trembling. "Viana, you shouldn't be here." "Please, Mom, open the door." A pause, a shuffle of feet. Then the lock clicked. The door cracked open just an inch. Inside, I saw Dad sitting on the edge of the bed, hands shaking under a thin blanket. Mom's eyes darted toward the hallway before settling on me. She looked smaller somehow. "He says if we talk to you," she whispered, "we'll lose everything." My throat tightened. "You already lost everything." She flinched. I softened my voice. "But I can get it back." I stepped inside, closing the door behind me. My phone was already recording, screen dimmed. I set it gently on the nightstand, sliding it toward the lamp. Dad shook his head. "He said you'd ruin us, Vi. That you'd drag us through court. We're too old for that." I knelt beside him. "He's using your names to drain every account. He's taken your house, your savings, your dignity. That's not protection. That's theft." Mom's lip quivered. She looked at the floor. "He said it was just business." That you were fine with it. I reached for her hand. This time she didn't pull away. Her skin was cool, fragile. He lied, I said, and he's still lying. She began to cry quietly, not the loud kind, the kind that hurts because it's held in too long. The recorder on the nightstand blinked once, capturing everything. The sound of a car door slamming broke the moment. My heart stuttered. Then his voice, sharp, echoing down the hallway. "Who's here?" I looked at Mom. Her eyes went wide. "Hide this," I whispered, slipping the phone under a pillow. Theron stormed into the room. His face was flushed, eyes glassy. The smell of bourbon hit first. His voice was a growl. "You think you can sneak in here like a thief?" "I'm not the thief," I said calmly. He stepped closer. "You're not even in the will anymore, sweetheart. You think your fancy degrees make you untouchable? You think money gives you power?" He leaned in, voice low. "You've got nothing." Mom started crying harder. "Please stop, Theron." He slammed his hand on the wall beside my head. The sound cracked through the air, but I didn't flinch. I looked him dead in the eye. "I'll see you in court." For a moment, he froze. Then he laughed, that hollow, mocking laugh I'd come to hate. But I could see it, the flicker behind his eyes. Doubt. When I turned to leave, he grabbed my arm, hard. "You walk away from this, and I'll bury you in paperwork." I met his grip with a steady gaze. "You already buried yourself." He released me, maybe realizing just how steady my voice was. I didn't slam the door behind me this time. I closed it slowly, quietly. From inside, I heard my parents' muffled voices, pleading, apologizing. But I couldn't make out the words. I didn't need to. Outside, the air was damp and cold, and I inhaled it like medicine. My car was waiting at the curb, headlights catching the rain beginning to fall. I sat in the driver's seat, exhaling shakily. Then I reached for my phone, the one I'd left in the car, synced to my Bluetooth system. It had recorded everything, his threats, his tone, my parents' fear, every word. I pressed play, letting his voice echo in the dark. And then, beneath it, something softer. My mother's voice, faint but clear between sobs. "The papers, they weren't for taxes, they were for the trust." I froze. My fingers tightened around the phone. That one word, trust, changed everything. I barely slept that night. The hum of the refrigerator and the ticking clock were the only sounds keeping me company. I sat at my desk, surrounded by papers, coffee mugs, and a half-eaten granola bar that had turned stale hours ago. My laptop screen glowed in the dark, casting shadows across old documents stacked high around me. I hit play again. My mother's voice, faint but unmistakable. "The papers, they weren't for taxes. They were for the trust." That word echoed through the room like a pulse. I reached for the thick folder labeled Calder Family Trust Agreement. I remembered the day I signed it, sitting beside my father at his kitchen table. He was so proud, talking about protecting the family legacy. The lawyer's pen had felt heavier than it should have. Now, years later, my eyes burned as I scanned the fine print line by line. Then I saw it. Clause 14C. In the event of beneficiary incapacitation or coercion, all property and holdings shall revert to the primary donor or their representative. I leaned back, heart pounding. If I could prove they were coerced, if I could show Theron had forced their hands, everything would come back. The house, the money, all of it. The irony wasn't lost on me. He'd built his whole scam on greed, and hidden inside the same document was the seed of his downfall. By morning, I was driving downtown, exhaustion clinging to me like smoke. The Dallas courthouse loomed ahead, a mix of glass and old stone that never looked welcoming. Inside, the air smelled of paper and disinfectant. I approached the counter, holding my ID. I need to see the trust filings under Howard and June Calder. The clerk, a man with graying hair and a badge that read Henderson, glanced up. That's private family property. I'm listed as a grantor, I replied evenly. He hesitated, then sighed, typing something into his system. After a moment, he slid a manila folder across the counter. Inside were copies of the documents, the same ones I'd seen before. But this time, I noticed something new. The notary stamp was from Theron Marcine Financial Services, LLC. I stared at the name. He hadn't even tried to hide it. The signatures were identical to the ones from the nursing home, shaky, unsteady, wrong. My father's name stopped mid-letter again. Can I request security footage from the day these were notarized? I asked. The clerk frowned. We don't release that unless there's an active investigation. I looked him straight in the eye. Then you'll have one by tomorrow. His expression shifted. Not fear, respect. By the time I stepped out into the sunlight, the fatigue had turned to something sharper. Purpose. That afternoon, I met Lyle Patterson at a diner off the highway. He was one of those men who never seemed to age. Steady, quiet, eyes that missed nothing. We'd worked together once, years ago, when I'd helped audit a fraudulent insurance scheme. He listened as I explained, his hands wrapped around a cup of black coffee. When I finished, he simply said, "Play it." I set the phone on the table, hit play, and let the recording of Theron's threats fill the space between us. When it ended, Lyle exhaled slowly. "He's sloppy," he said. "He talks too much. You've got timestamps, names, the whole deal. That's enough to map out where he was and when." "Can you trace it?" I asked. He nodded. "Already did while you were talking. The notary? He's registered out of Theron's brother's office. I know the guy. Weak link. Probably didn't realize what he signed off on." He leaned back, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "You want it official or off the books?" "Both," I said. He grinned. "Now we're talking." Driving home, the city unfolded in front of me, all glass and steel, indifferent and shining. The sun was setting behind the skyline, painting everything gold for a few fleeting minutes. I rolled the window down and let the wind cut through the fatigue. Money can be stolen, houses can be signed away, but intent, that's what nails them. Every insult replayed in my mind. "You're not family anymore. You're too proud. You think you're better than us." They weren't just words now, they were evidence. I didn't want revenge, not anymore. Revenge burns fast and leaves you hollow. What I wanted was accountability. I looked at my reflection in the window. My face looked older tonight. Tired, yes, but clear. "They taught me to stay quiet," I said softly. "Now they'll learn what silence sounds like when it's evidence." By nightfall, my desk was covered again. Folders stacked, labeled neatly in black ink. Uzazela, Theron, Notary Office, Bank Manager, and one more, Mom and Dad, Protected Assets. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a long moment before typing the label. The printer hummed, spitting out the pages one by one. The sound was almost soothing. Then my phone buzzed. A message from Lyle. "Lyle, got a hit. The notary's ready to talk, but only off the record." I typed back immediately. Me. "Tell him I'll bring the one thing he's scared of. Proof." I hit send and leaned back. The lamp cast a pool of soft yellow light across my desk. Next to my papers sat a cold cup of tea. The same one from that first night. The surface unmoving, but now it carried something else. Closure in waiting. I lifted it, staring at the faint ring it had left on the wood beneath. "Everything comes back around," I murmured. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky, low and long, not loud enough to shake the walls, but enough to rattle something deeper in my chest. By morning, the air still felt heavy, like it was holding its breath. I drove across town, windshield wipers dragging slowly over a windshield streaked with the night's leftover storm. My fingers tapped the steering wheel as I turned onto a quiet street, the notary's office just up ahead. It was a squat building with peeling beige paint and blinds drawn halfway, like it had given up pretending to be professional years ago. Lyle was already waiting, leaning against his car, pretending to scroll his phone, but I knew he was watching the entrance. I parked and walked up the cracked walkway. The office door opened with a weak creak. Inside, it smelled like stale coffee and old paper. The notary, a thin, older man with tired eyes and hands that shook just slightly, stood behind a metal desk stacked with folders. "You know why I'm here," I said. He didn't pretend. He didn't deflect. "I didn't want to do it," he said, sitting down slowly. "He said your father had already agreed. And your sister, she was there." She smiled, said it was all for the best. I didn't blink. "Did she say why?" He glanced up, guilty. "She said, you had enough, that you didn't need family ties anymore, that this was just housekeeping." Housekeeping. Like cutting me out of my own parents' lives was no more meaningful than taking out the trash. "They paid me cash," he added, "told me to notarize fast. No questions." I heard the door creak behind me. Lyle stepped in, silent as a shadow, and placed a small voice recorder on the edge of the desk. "For your protection," he said. The notary looked at the recorder, then at me. His shoulders slumped. "I'll sign a statement." We left with the document in hand, his signature still wet, his hands trembling worse than before. Outside, I exhaled. "He's scared of them," I said quietly. Lyle nodded. "Everyone is, until someone stops being polite." As we walked toward the parking lot, I reached for my keys, and that's when I saw them. 2 police cruisers pulling up at the curb. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. A young officer stepped out of the first car, holding a folded document. "Miss Calder?" I tucked the notary's statement into my coat pocket. "There's been a report of property theft," he continued, "from your parents' residence." I blinked. "You're saying I stole from my own parents?" "We just follow the report, ma'am." Before I could respond, the second car's door opened. Theron, sunglasses, casual blazer, that smug smirk curling at the corner of his mouth. He stepped out, hands in his pockets, like this was just another board meeting. "Told you she'd show up where she didn't belong," he said, looking straight at me. I turned to the officer. "He forged my name, lied to notaries, stole funds out of accounts with my name on them, and now he's calling me a thief?" Theron tilted his head. "Prove it." My fists clenched. Lyle rested a hand on my shoulder, his voice low. "Not here. Not like this." I nodded, jaw tight. I handed over my license. The officers were polite, too polite. They took my statement, made notes, said it would be followed up. The kind of bureaucratic courtesy that meant nothing would happen unless I made it happen. When they finally drove off, I leaned against my car, dizzy with rage. "He's baiting you," Lyle said. "He wants a scene." "Then he'll be disappointed." My phone buzzed in my coat pocket. Unknown number. I opened it. A screenshot. My face, mid-sentence, frozen in an unflattering frame. The headline read, "Millionaire daughter accused of defrauding elderly parents in ongoing legal battle." The local news had picked it up. It was spreading. I stared at it for a long moment. Then I laughed. Quiet. Bitter. "He thinks reputation is power," I said. "Let's show him what real power looks like." Back at my apartment, I didn't turn on the lights. I went straight to my laptop, the screen flickering to life in the dim room. The article was already trending. Thousands of comments, accusations, defenses, strangers debating my life like it was up for vote. I didn't read them. Instead, I opened a new email. Subject, Re. Evidence drop, full context. 2. The journalist. I attached the audio files, the notary's signed statement, copies of the trust clause. I wrote one line at the bottom. Run it all, but wait for my signal. Another message popped up on my phone. This one wasn't anonymous. Theron, you're done. Stay quiet. I stared at the screen. Then I typed, you should have remembered. I'm the one who built the silence. Send. Later that night, I sat by the window with a mug of lukewarm tea, watching the city below. Headlights glided through the streets, soft and distant. I held the folder in my lap. Exhibit A. The documents inside felt heavier than paper. They were weight, leverage, voiceover in my head, not just for me, but for whoever would hear the story next. They wanted to erase me from my own story, but you can't erase the author. I closed the folder. Let the silence settle around me. The kind that used to feel empty, but now felt like strategy. Then my phone rang. It was my father. His voice was barely a whisper. Viana, don't come home tomorrow. I froze. Why? A long pause. He's planning something. The line went dead, and I realized he wasn't warning me to keep me safe. That thought looped in my head like static on a broken radio as I pulled into the courthouse parking lot. The sun was sharp and cold, the kind that didn't warm you no matter how long it stayed on your skin. Dad's voice still echoed in my mind. Don't come home tomorrow. It hadn't been a plea. It had been a warning, practiced, precise, and frightened. Why tomorrow? What was coming? I sat in the car for a moment, trying to still my breathing. My phone buzzed on the seat beside me. A text from Lyle. Lyle, be careful. I just heard Theron's filing for an emergency injunction. He's trying to freeze your accounts. My pulse slowed instead of rising. So that's his move, I muttered. Good. He's playing on my turf now. I grabbed my files, checked the recorder in my purse, and stepped out into the noise of the courthouse plaza. Inside the lobby, I spotted them immediately. My parents, sitting together on a hard wooden bench near the elevators. They looked smaller somehow, frail, uncertain. Mom's hands clutched a tissue that had already fallen apart from overuse. She couldn't meet my eyes. Dad stood slowly as I approached. His hands trembled, but not from age, from guilt. And then I saw it, the briefcase, black leather, polished, unmistakable, in his grip, Theron's. I stopped cold. Dad, I said carefully, did you bring his case here? He looked at the floor. Mom spoke instead, her voice shaking. He said if we cooperate, they'll let us stay in the house. My throat went dry. You're helping him take me down? Dad's eyes finally met mine, watery, ashamed, but determined in the way desperate people often are. We can't live in another motel, Viana, he said softly. You'll understand someday. The hallway blurred for a second. All the noise, the chatter, the echo of footsteps, it faded. No, Dad, I whispered. I already do. The courtroom smelled like dust and cologne. Theron sat across from me, crisp suit, smug posture, flanked by a lawyer young enough to still think arrogance was strategy. My sister, Isella, sat beside him. A vision of calm, pearls at her neck, mask of composure carefully painted on. Their attorney spoke first. The words blurred together. Fraud, elder abuse, coercion. They accused me of manipulating my own parents. I kept my gaze steady, my hands folded. When the judge turned to me, I stood slowly. Your Honor, I said evenly, I'd like to submit recorded evidence, time-stamped, transcribed, and verified. A murmur swept through the courtroom. I continued, voice clear but calm. This includes my brother-in-law's threats, a falsified signature, and a notarized confession from the officer who witnessed the trust's manipulation. Theron's smirk flickered, just slightly. The judge adjusted his glasses. Proceed. I took a step forward, sliding a folder across the desk. "And one final clause," I said. "Clause 14C of the Calder Family Trust, which reinstates all ownership in the case of coercion." Silence. Heavy, complete. Mom gasped quietly. Dad's face fell into his hands. The judge flipped through the pages, lips moving silently as he read. Theron shifted in his seat. His lawyer whispered something urgent, but he didn't answer. Finally, the judge spoke. "Motion to review the trust clause is granted." That sound, the gavel tapping once, was small, but it split the air like thunder. The moment we stepped out of the courtroom, the hallway exploded into chaos. Flashes, shouts, reporters everywhere. I blinked into the lights as microphones pushed toward me. And there, near the back, stood my journalist friend, camera crew in tow, face solemn, steady. Her voice rang clear above the noise. "Breaking update. New evidence submitted in the Calder family case reveals financial manipulation and elder exploitation by Theron Marcin." The crowd surged. Theron lunged forward, pointing at me, eyes blazing. "You think this proves anything? You'll regret it." I didn't flinch. "No, Theron," I said, loud enough for the cameras. "You will." Two police officers stepped between us. The notary's confession had already made it into circulation. His name was trending online by now, the kind of exposure you can't outrun. Then, in the crush of cameras, I heard a soft thud. Mom. She'd fainted, her body folding against the marble floor like paper. Dad dropped to his knees, calling her name over and over. I pushed through the crowd, kneeling beside them. Her pulse fluttered beneath my fingertips. Fast, frightened. "I didn't do this to you," I whispered. "I did this for you." Dad looked up, tears streaking his cheeks. "We were scared, baby," he said hoarsely. "He said you'd put us in jail." I shook my head. "No, Dad, just him." Paramedics pushed through, lifting Mom gently onto a stretcher. Cameras clicked all around us. Reporters murmured. I stood as they led her away, the crowd parting like a wave. My heart felt heavy, but my face stayed calm. For the first time, I realized that control was its own kind of armor. The courthouse steps were nearly empty by sunset. The frenzy had moved online now. I walked slowly toward the parking lot, the sound of my heels echoing faintly. Lyle met me halfway, a folded paper in hand. "You did it," he said quietly. "The injunction's void. The assets are frozen under your name again." I took the paper, staring at it for a long time. "No one wins in families like this," I said finally. "But at least the truth does." We stood there for a moment, watching the last police car drive away. Its lights flashed faint red against the courthouse walls. I thought I'd feel victorious. I didn't. "I thought it would feel like winning," I said softly. "Instead, it just feels empty." Lyle nodded. "It usually does." He walked off into the night, leaving me standing beneath the courthouse lights. I pulled out my phone. Hundreds of notifications, messages, interviews. Strangers sending words of support, praise, sympathy. I smiled faintly, turned the phone face down, and said quietly, "Let silence speak for me now." Then, a vibration against my palm. A new voicemail. Unknown number. I pressed play. My sister's voice, smooth, calm, venom wrapped in silk. "You think this is over?" she said. "You don't even know what's in the second trust." The line clicked off. I stared at the phone for a long moment, the courthouse lights flickering above me. There was a second trust, hidden, in plain sight. The next morning, sunlight poured through the blinds, soft and steady, warming the room that had spent too many nights steeped in silence. My coffee sat untouched beside a thick envelope on the kitchen table, yellowed, edges worn, postmarked 2 years ago. It was my mother's handwriting. I frowned, tracing the familiar cursive letters of my name. Somehow it had been caught in the backlog of the estate's paperwork. Or maybe it had waited for this exact moment. I sat down, took a deep breath, and opened it carefully. Inside was a letter. Folded twice, the ink faded in places but still elegant. My hands trembled slightly as I began to read. My dear Viana, if you're reading this, it means the family trust is no longer what we hoped it would be. I signed what they told me to because your father was sick and I was scared. You were always the strong one. I just didn't realize how much you'd have to carry alone. I felt the air leave my lungs. The pages trembled in my grip as I turned to the next paragraph. There's another account, not in Theron's name, not in ours, it's yours. I created it quietly, under the name Aurelia House Foundation. Use it to rebuild, not the house, but what was lost between us. By the time I reached her signature, the words blurred through tears. I folded the letter carefully and pressed it against my chest. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel anger or exhaustion, just the ache of something simple and human. Regret mixed with love. By noon, I was on the road again, this time toward the nursing home where my parents had been placed temporarily. The air inside smelled of disinfectant and soft blankets. I found my mother near the window, a lightweight blanket draped over her knees. She looked smaller than I remembered, but her eyes, those sharp, knowing eyes, were still there. When she saw me, she smiled faintly. I thought you'd be too busy saving the world to visit your old mother. I knelt beside her wheelchair, resting my hand gently on hers. You knew he'd destroy everything, didn't you? She hesitated before answering. He promised to protect your father. I thought I could fix it later, but I was wrong. Her voice cracked on the last word. I swallowed hard. You saw the court hearing? She nodded. I saw everything. You didn't do it to shame us. No, I said softly. I did it to save you, even when you didn't want saving. Her hand tightened around mine, fragile but firm. You always had your father's stubbornness, she said, tears glinting in her eyes. Maybe now I can have some of your courage. I smiled, the kind of smile that hurt and healed at the same time. Then let's both start again, I whispered, with the truth this time. That afternoon, I met Lyle at a small cafe tucked between an old bookstore and a laundromat. He'd already ordered 2 coffees, one untouched, waiting for me. When I sat down, he slid a folder across the table. Found it, he said. Aurelia House Foundation. Registered in your mother's name, later transferred to yours. She hid it under a different EIN, tied to a senior care fund. I opened the folder. Inside were documents, pristine, official, showing a charitable account worth nearly $1.2 million, untouched. I ran my fingers along the page, shaking my head in disbelief. She hid it. In kindness. Guess compassion was her insurance plan, Lyle said quietly. I smiled for the first time in days. It's poetic, a trust built on compassion, not control. He raised an eyebrow. What'll you do with it? I looked out the cafe window, where the afternoon sun filtered through the trees. Turn it into what it was meant to be. I'll rename the foundation, use it to help elderly victims of financial abuse. Lyle nodded, a rare smile tugging at his mouth. You're not just closing a case, Viana. You're rewriting the rules. What they used to destroy me became the tool I used to rebuild others. A week later, I drove back to the family estate. The place looked smaller now, stripped of its grandeur, its shadows softened by time. Boxes lined the hallway. The air was still, filled with the scent of dust and old wood polish. I walked into my old bedroom. The walls were bare except for one thing I'd left behind years ago. A photo frame on the nightstand. The four of us smiling. Before the lies, before the signatures, before the silence. I set it upright again and whispered, "You can rest now." My phone buzzed. A notification from my lawyer. Case closed. Assets transferred. Theron sentenced for fraud. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. The sunlight spilled across the floor, washing everything in a quiet, forgiving gold. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the weight of unfinished business pressing on my chest. On my way out, I stopped at the front porch. That same old light bulb flickered weakly overhead, the one that had blinked through every chapter of our unraveling. I unscrewed it, replaced it with a new one from my car's glove box. It glowed steady and warm. I stood there for a moment, watching it hum to life, and thought, it wasn't about money, it never was. It was about being seen, even when they wanted you invisible. I closed the door gently behind me. Weeks later, I found myself back in a courtroom, not as a defendant, but as an observer. My parents sat on the witness stand, testifying in a case against elder financial exploitation. This time, they were witnesses, not victims. My mother looked stronger now. When her testimony ended, she turned and found me in the back row. Our eyes met. No words, just understanding. For the first time, the silence between us wasn't heavy. It was peace. I walked out of the courthouse into the morning sun. No applause, no soundtrack, no one waiting outside. Just the steady sound of my heels clicking on marble. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it just stops whispering.